Marx was not simply envisioning another neutral economic theory as some people might think. Marxism is actually an alternative worldview with religious proportions. For Marx and Engels, when they drafted the Communist Manifesto, they saw it as a revolutionary, quote, catechism, as the communist confession of faith. And this is proven in Engels' letter to Marx, actually, in 1847, where he said, quote, "I believe we had better drop the catechism form and call the thing Communist Manifesto," right? He was fearing that giving away the religious nature of the idea would actually turn people away. Marx's ideology was materialist to the core. It focused on money, prosperity, property, and gold. Thus, the key to the communist utopia was actually economics. This is why Marx wrote that way. He adamantly rejected any notion of a God, actually. Economics was Marx's salvation. For the communists, man does live by bread alone, contrary to what Jesus says. And it's ironic that socialists and communists will blast their wealthy for being obsessed with money, when actually they're really just projecting their own obsession, envy, and coveting, and greed. And we see many examples of such hypocrisy from political pundits and leaders of the left. It seems like the radical left has openly embraced much of the cultural Marxism of our day. Now, Marxism is not religiously neutral. It's a system that is hostile, especially to Christianity. And Christians need to be alert to its danger today. We have to see Marxism and all the ideologies which derive from it, such as critical theory, as applied to the variety of fields such as racism and LGBTQ stuff and queer studies and post-colonialism, etc. We have to view all of those as not just academic ideas, but as actually competing worldviews. And this is why its adherents often have a sort of religious fervor and devotion around their cause. It is their faith and salvation, you see. They are systems of thought which seek to make sense of all of reality and provide comprehensive solutions. They are another religion altogether and cannot be mixed with Christianity. Yet this is exactly what some Christians and church leaders are seeking to do today. One cannot take on these ideologies as an analytical tool without having to take on the fundamental presuppositions of those systems. Now, even though Marx and Engels envisioned themselves as religious leaders, right, of their new faith to the world, they were at the same time atheists. However, Karl Marx did not just deny God's existence or was, dispassionately agnostic about it. He actually hated God. The reasons for his hatred are actually quite many, including his detesting of absolute truth and having any objective moral standards to be held accountable. Communism begins, Marx said, where atheism begins. In the Communist Manifesto, he and Engels remarked, quote, "Communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality." Marx saw religion as a crutch and the way that people invented something to help themselves deal with suffering. He actually famously wrote, quote, "Religious suffering is, at one and the same time, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of a soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." Now, Paul Kenger, he knows this, that the Soviet leadership would want Marxism and the state to be central to all citizens' lives. Hence, the words of the Communist Manifesto were meant to be read and learned, drilled and memorized and internalized. Any challenging text, especially an influential one like the Bible, was actually unwelcomed. And this is why you still see this today in communist countries like North Korea, for example. Religion was perceived as an ever-present, powerful enemy, not to be taken lightly. That's from Paul Kenger's book, The Devil and Karl Marx. Now, Marx was most passionately against Christianity of all religions. He seemed actually favorable to Muslims, very interesting, and praised certain Muslims, expressing sympathy for their hatred against Christians and the hope of an ultimate victory over those infidels. This is something that the present-day leftist politicians actually seem to have in common with Marx, who always seem to support Islam above other religions, especially Christianity. I find that quite interesting. Now, throughout history, one of the most brutally restricted rights by communist governments was and remains the freedom of worship, which communists always and everywhere have attacked with fervor. Now, one may wonder why an atheistic ideology would be so threatened by religion. This is because belief in God stands in the way of totalitarian desire to transform human nature. God becomes actually a competitor to the communist control of the body, mind, and spirit of man that Marx wanted to redefine in his own image. And this is why totalitarian states are usually hostile to religion, and especially Christianity, since the sovereign God of the Bible threatens the secular state's claim to total sovereignty. Now, whether the totalitarian leader was Fidel Castro or Pol Pot or Joseph Stalin, the sentiment was always the same. Wherever they went, from east to west, from Africa to Asia, from North Korea to the Soviet Union, communists, they shared one goal: the annihilation of religion. Right? Quote, Marx was not first a communist and then an atheist. He was first an atheist, then a communist. Communism was merely the political expression of his atheism. As he hated God, so he would hate those who own property. That was from Fulton Sheen's The Church, Communism, and Democracy. Now, while Marxism has not succeeded in convincing the world that there is no God, it has succeeded in convincing the world that there is a devil. We must recognize that at the core of these ideologies is a desire to destroy the true religion and supplant their own false one.